Hi! So far in our training, we have talked about teaching with journeys and the student experience. So now we are going to dive in and look at the basics of thinkcentral.com platform. In order for your students to access any of the online content for journeys, you will have to create classrooms and accounts for each individual student. Sometimes districts choose to create the classrooms and the student accounts for the teachers in a batch creation, but your district has decided to give teachers the flexibility of setting up their own classrooms and adding your own individual students. So I am going to make sure that you know how to do that today and that you feel confident with managing your classroom and your students by the end of this training. So let's go ahead and log into thinkcentral.com. And when you log in, you'll see the teacher dashboard here, as we looked at earlier with teaching with journeys. All of your resources are right there, but if you look in the top left-hand corner, or near the top left-hand corner, you'll see Manage Classes. And this is where you're going to go to create your individual classes, to add your students, to remove students, to make sure that you have all of the books assigned to students as well. So go ahead and click on Manage Classes. Oh, and it's bumped me out. Oh, okay. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so we are back in and we are all logging in and going to Manage Classes, and that link is in the top left-hand corner of your teacher dashboard. Okay, so once in here, we are going to look at setting up classes. And as you can see, I've done some practice ones in here as well. So we're going to go to Add Class to Begin. And then you'll give your class a name. So one thing we recommend is giving it using your last name and then the school year, that maybe the end of the school year or the full school year, because you cannot duplicate names, so you want to make sure that it is set up correctly the first time. So I'm going to call mine Klopfer 2018-19 class, and then I'm going to select the grade for which content I want to pull in for that. So I'm going to select grade 1. And then down here, you can also select the programs that you want to have available to your students. So depending on if you have, a variety of levels for different students that you think you might be working with and you might want to be able to pull in content for, you can click on other grade levels surrounding that grade level that you're teaching. But for my example today, we're just going to look at just first grade material. And then scroll down and look at the list of products. Notice there are a lot of products listed. One thing to keep in mind when looking at these is that this is also what your students are going to see when they log in. So kind of take a step back and remember when we looked at the student experience, the students were able to see their textbooks listed when they first logged in on their dashboard. If you have a lot of things listed, they're going to see a lot of different resources, and it could be overwhelming for them. So just think about that when we're going through and looking at the products that you want to make sure that your students are working out of. In the past, I've seen teachers, uncheck all of the ones listed, and it's awesome that we have so many resources, and you can always pull in some of these resources later in the year or remove some if you decide whatever you have set up already is not working for your kids. So just to get started, I would definitely, tie in some of the Journeys leveled readers, with the student book. The write-in reader is very important for your students. And those are the main ones to get started that you definitely want to include so that your kids are able to access all of the content that they're seeing in their paper student book, and it matches what they're seeing online as well. Okay, so let's begin with those. Again, this is something that you can go back in and you can talk with your team or talk with your administrators and see what you want to make sure that you are including. Oh, I almost forgot the student ebook as well. Okay, so we are going to click Save then. Right now, these are this is what we want to be included for our students. Okay, so now that we click Save, we are going to go ahead and add students. And if you scroll down, you'll see Assigned Students. So go ahead and click on Assigned Students. And you can see that you can filter your students by grade level, which will make it a lot easier for you when you're sorting through all of them. So I'm going to go ahead and click on just first grade students and select Find. And then it's going to bring up all the kiddos in first grade. So, like I said, your district has given you guys the choice to add your kids individually, which will make it really nice if you get new students throughout the year, because you'll be able to just add them yourself right away. So I'm going to go through, you can actually, hit Control and do multiple kids at once. Select them. So I want to maybe select these kids. So I'm going to select Add. So let's just pretend this is my roster, these 4 kids. And then I'm going to hit Done. And if you are the only first grade teacher, you could simply click Add All and it'll move everybody over. Or like I said, you can do them individually or hit Control and highlight more at once. So then we'll hit Done and OK. Okay. So now it's taking us back to that Manage Classes screen, and you'll see that our new classroom is set up right here. The next thing we're going to do is take a look at the roster and some other options that you have once you have your class set up. All right, so notice that you have the classes listed here. Say if you did have different periods or, you were the teacher teaching reading to multiple classes, you can add more than one. If you select the little circle next to it, you can go to Edit Class, or you can simply just click on the hyperlink to view your class information, and this will take you back to that screen where you're able to see the different materials that you have added for your class, and if you want to add anything from different grade levels as well. But we are going to look at just viewing the class roster. So click the little circle next to your class and then select View Class Roster. And now you'll see that we have all of our students listed here. This is the place that you'd want to go to if you needed to edit any students, remove any students. You can also export your class roster, which will export onto an Excel document. I'm sorry, not an Excel, but a CSV spreadsheet, which is very, very similar. And then the other thing I wanted to point out before we move on is the help feature that we've looked at in each of the sections. This is just a really great tool. If you're not sure where something is or you have any questions, click on that. If it's pertaining to classes, simply click on the classes and you'll see, adding student accounts, finding students, editing, gives you lots and lots of helpful tools here. All right, so let's move on. The next thing we are going to look at is assigning work. So you've already learned about creating classes and assigning students, but now let's look at why assigning work is so important. This allows you to make use of the online assessment and pulling reports features, which will be really helpful for you when seeing where your students are and measuring their growth. This also allows you to use multiple choice automatic graded features and help you make more informed instructional decisions by analyzing that data that they nicely, beautifully collect for you. So I did want to point out that in your PLG pages 54 through 58, there is an overview of the teacher dashboard. So if you have any questions about anything, where anything is, please check that out. I also encourage you to flag these pages for easy reference. All right, so let's take a look. This is going to be yellow engagement. We're going to be all just working together as we look through creating or assigning work. Okay, so just get a little overview of assigning work. You will go into assignments for that. And then as you see, you'll have the option to set up date ranges, pull from specific classes or even specific students if you want. And then it'll give you different programs that you're pulling from because there are a lot of teachers that use thinkcentral.com for other subject areas or multiple classes. If you want to go ahead and actually flip to page 58, it does give you step-by-step directions for assigning work. So those might be nice to kind of reference and flip back and forth from as we're working through it. So now we're going to go ahead and go back into our Think Central account. Okay, so looking at assigning work to students, there are a couple of different ways to get to where you would do that, but I wanted to take you back to just the most basic route, and that's if you just start at your teacher dashboard when you first log into Think Central, and then you click on assignments. And then it's going to give you the option to add assignments. So you can find assignments that are already listed. Any assignments that you already, sorry, this one, I was hoping my example would show that. I was going to say any assignments that you've already assigned your students in the past would appear in this area below, which is really great to look back at in case you need to reassign something to a student or double check. But for this, we're going to look at adding a new assignment. We're going to look at actually adding a test. And then I'm just going to search. So I'm wanting to look for a Unit 1 test. So I'm going to search for Unit 1. And then here I can find the one I'm looking for, and it's the Unit 1 benchmark test. So I want to see where my students are at the beginning before we even begin Unit 1. So I'm going to just click on Assign for that. So you see that little assign icon, and I'm just going to call it simply exactly what it says, Unit 1 Benchmark Test. Again, you can come up with your own names or whatever works out for your schedule. And the instructions are kind of funny to me, but they say do, just do. The students need to do it because as you know from looking at the student experience, what they see is things to do. So very, very clear for them. For the class, I'm going to select the Klopfer 2018-19. The next option is selecting your group. So I don't actually have any groups set up, but that is really great, especially if you do want to go ahead and group your kids by their individual, small reading groups or something like that. You can have that set up ahead of time. So if you do go in and want to give them specific tests or specific leveled readers, you can do that by just selecting the group, which makes it easy. Another way to individually select students is just to pick the kids that you do want to assign. So you can add all. If you were, for this example, the benchmark test, I would most likely want to give that to my entire class. So for that one, I would say add all. But there could be some that you just want to give to individual kids, and then you can just decide to add to those students. You can do the available date. Now, depending on if you want to give them some time to do this or if this is something they're going to do at home, out of school, you might give them a little bit more of a window. But if it's something that they're just simply doing that day in class, then you'll want to adjust that due date. One thing to remember that is when it does go past, if you do make that due date just one day and you do have a student or two absent, you will have to reassign it to them. So that's kind of an extra step to go back in. So it might be helpful just to maybe tag on at least a couple days onto it just in case you're missing any kiddos that day that they do take the benchmark test. Times available, you could have scheduled start times if you wanted. Those are just some extra steps that you might want to take depending on what works best for your class. You can even add passwords to access the assessment. You have the option to allow your students to pause the assessments. You have the option to let them see their answers. This is all personal preference or preference among your school or your district, whatever works best for you. You can even go through and select some questions. So if you want to make that more of a modified test or a custom test, you can go through and look at those questions too. And then they're looking at mastery for these tests. So that'll be helpful for you when you are measuring. We're kind of starting with that starting point of data and then measuring from there. All right, so we're going to click Save. Gives you another pop-up to remind you. All right, and so now we can see our assignment listed below. We see the due date of when we want our students to take it. This number is kind of cool. If you're going in and checking, if your kids have taken it, it'll show you how many have been assigned it have completed it. All right. You can go through and edit it at any time also, show answers. You can check all of that. So it's kind of nice that you can go back and change things if you need to. Okay, so